All right, sweet ones. Lucy, Susan, Peter, Edmund, they're all in Narnia now. And we left them. They found out Mr. Tumnus had been arrested, right? For fraternizing with humans. That means he protected Lucy, right? He saved her. And so they found out that he'd been arrested. So they said, we're going to go find him. We're going to help him out. And so they were following a beautiful robin. And she would fly from branch to branch and they would follow him. Actually, it was a him robin. And here we go. While the two boys were whispering behind, both girls suddenly cried, "Oh!" and stopped. What was wrong, do you think? "The robin," cried Lucy. "The robin, it's flown away." And so it had, right out of sight. "And now what are we to do?" said Edmund, giving Peter a look which was as much to say, "What did I tell you?" Never say I told you so. "Shh, look," said Susan. "What?" said Peter. "There's something moving among the trees over there to the left." They all stared as hard as they could, and no one felt very comfortable. So here they were all looking into the woods like, what is it? Have you ever done that? Just looked even out in the garden and said, what is that? Oh, sometimes with me I'm like, oh, it's a bunny eating my veggies, but that's okay. They all stared as hard as they could. "There it goes again," said Susan. "I saw it that time too," said Peter. "It's still there. It just gone behind a big tree." "What is it?" asked Lucy, trying very hard not to sound nervous. "Whatever it is," said Peter, "it's dodging us. It's something that doesn't want to be seen." "Let's go home," said Susan. And then, though nobody said it out loud, everyone suddenly realized the same fact that Edmund had whispered to Peter at the end of the last chapter. They were lost. "What's it like?" said Lucy. It's kind of an animal," said Susan. And then, look, quick, there it is." They all saw it at the same time, a whiskered, furry face which had looked out from behind a tree. But this time it didn't immediately draw back. So here it was. It was behind, it looked out, it was behind, it looked out. This time it stayed out. Instead, the animals put its paw to its mouth, just like humans put their finger on their lip when they are signaling to you to be quiet. So he's got this big paw, right? And instead of going, shh, it went, shh. Then it disappeared once again. The children all stood holding their breath. A moment later, the stranger came out from behind the tree, glanced around as if it were afraid somebody was watching. So he came out, looked around, and said, "Hush," and made signs to them to join him in the thicker bit of the wood. So he's like, "Hush, come on. "I know what it is," said Peter. Can you guys guess? What do you think it is? Do you think it's a deer? Do you think it's a bunny rabbit? A fox? What else could it be? Could be anything in this woods because it's Narnia. But it was a beaver. "It's a beaver. I saw its tail." Have you ever seen a beaver tail? It definitely lets you know what kind of animal it is. "It wants us to go to it," said Susan, "and it's warning us not to make noise." "I know," said Peter. "The question is, are we going to go to it or not?" What do you think, Lou? "I think it's a nice beaver," said Lucy. "Yes, but how do we know?" said Edmund. "Shan't we have to risk it?" said Susan. "I mean, it's no good just standing here, and I feel like I want some dinner." These kids are very motivated by their tummies, aren't they? At this moment, the beaver again popped its head out from behind the tree and beckoned earnestly for them to come. "Come on," said Peter. "Let's give it a try. All keep close together. We ought to be a match for one beaver if it turns out to be the enemy." So the children all got close together and walked up to the tree and in behind it, and there, sure enough, they found a beaver. But it still drew back, saying to them in a hoarse, throaty whisper, "Further in, come further in, right in here. We're not safe in the open." Only when it had led them into the dark spot where 4 trees grew so close together that their boughs met, and the brown earth and the pine needles could be seen underfoot. Because no snow had been able to fall there, did it begin to talk to them. So we brought them into 4 trees, all so close together that the snow couldn't even get in. So it was a very tight little dark spot. Are you the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve, it said. We're some of them, said Peter. Shh, said the beaver. Not so loud, please. We're not safe, even here. Why? Who are you afraid of? Said Peter. There's no one here but ourselves. There are trees, said the beaver. They're always listening. Most of them are on our side, but there are trees that would betray us to her. You know who I mean. And it nodded its head several times. If it comes to talking about sides, said Edmund, how do we know you're a friend? Not meaning to be rude, Mr. Beaver, added Peter, but you do see we're strangers. Quite right, said the beaver. Here is my token. With these words, it held up a little white object. They all looked at it in surprise, till suddenly Lucy said, Oh, of course, it's my handkerchief, the one I gave poor Mr. Tumnus. So we don't carry little handkerchiefs very much anymore, but it's like a little doily kind of, like you would use like Kleenex. They would have a little handkerchief, and a lot of times they'd have embroidery on it, and you would know whose it was. That's right, said Mr. Beaver. Poor fellow got wind of the arrest coming before it actually happened and handed this over to me. He said that if anything happened to him, I must meet you here and take you on. Here the beaver's voice sank down into silence, and it gave 1 or 2 very mysterious nods. Then, signaling to the children to stand as close around it as it possibly could, so their faces were almost tickled by its whiskers, it added in a low, deep voice, They say Aslan is on the move. Perhaps he has already landed. And now a very curious thing happened. None of the children knew who Aslan was any more than you do, but the moment the beaver had spoken these words, everyone felt quite different. Perhaps it has sometimes happened to you in a dream that someone says something which you don't understand, but in the dream it feels as if it had an enormous meaning, either a terrifying one, which turns out the whole dream was a nightmare, or else a lovely meaning, too lovely to put into words, which makes the dream so beautiful that you remember it all of your life and are always wishing that you could get into that dream again. It was like that now. At the name of Aslan, each one of the children felt something jump inside. Edmund felt a sensation of mysterious horror. Uh-oh. Peter felt suddenly brave and adventurous. Susan felt as if some delicious smell or some delightful strain of music had just floated by. And Lucy got the feeling that you have when you wake up in the morning and realize it's the beginning of the holidays or the beginning of summer. And what about Mr. Tumnus? Said Lucy. Where is he? Shh, said the beaver. Not here. I must bring you where we can talk and have dinner. Is it time for you to have dinner or time for you to go to sleep? Either way, I'm going to bring you the next part of this chapter tomorrow. All right, see you guys.